Welcome to the Maintainable Software Podcast, where we explore the art of improving existing software with seasoned practitioners who have helped organizations overcome the problems often associated with technical debt and legacy code. I'm your host, Robby Russell. On this episode, Irina Nazarova, who is the CEO of Evil Martians, a software development consultancy. Irina joins us today from San Francisco, California in the United States. Irina Nazarova, we're so glad to have you join us on Maintainable. Welcome.
Hey, thanks so much for having me.
I'm so excited to get to talk with you. There's a number of things I want to dig in with you today because you also run a software consultancy, and we'll dig into some of those topics. But first off, as you reflect on your experience in the industry, what do you believe are a few common characteristics of, dare I say, well-maintained software?
My answer would be coming from my perspective, which is quite specific because I mostly work with startups at Evil Martians and elsewhere. So my perception of well-maintained software will change depending on the stage of the company. So I'd say very early on, it doesn't really matter maybe for most companies because the biggest risk for them is not a software risk. Then at some point it starts getting more and more important, and that's where you got to start thinking how you want to keep the application, what I call alive. And this is I think my answer would be maybe, coming from a negative answer where I'd say you want to prevent the application from nearing this state of death where it becomes unmaintainable, meaning that there is no feature that you can properly estimate or plan how long it's going to take in this code base, with the code base that you have. And this is what I call a completely unmaintainable software, which is so hard to get back from, to take elsewhere from that point, because at that point, nobody can untangle anything. So maybe I'd also reference Vladimir Dementiev's book on layered design. That's about Rails, extending Rails and how to extend Rails in a maintainable way, but it's exactly what he's talking about, how to keep your growing Rails application maintainable.
That's interesting thinking about, given the context that you primarily work with startups and in that early phase where maybe, I'm going to air quote, best practices based off of what the community says, or like we should always make sure everything's well. Do you feel like during the early stage of a software project in a company's life cycle that they should be putting a lot of energy into making sure that things are, where's that line in terms of like, should they be investing a lot in automated testing and performance relating and scaling planning if they may not be around in 6 months? Like, where's that point where you don't want to like necessarily just throw out a bunch of crappy code just because it does the job, or are you advocating that like let's just run quick, let's see if we can sell this product or whatever, get customers, and then we can go back and figure this out later? So it feels like a tricky thing to like. How do you weigh it? Like, kind of what's the distinction to you there on what you may give up or trade-offs?
There's a bunch of memes about that, right, on the internet where you just started something and you're already thinking that, I don't know, Postgres is not going to scale for your needs. So, yeah, but there is a point, there are a few points, I think, moments in the life cycle of the product. One of them is called product market fit, where you recognize that you totally have demand for the product, at least from the early adopters, but they want it so much that they keep coming, and you can see them coming for more and again and again. And this is where you can say, finally, this is picking up. And this means we've sort of ruled out the main risk, which is, the product risk that you're building something nobody wants. We ruled it out, and from that point, we need to start actively working on the other risks that we have. And the risk of software not becoming unmaintainable is there among the top risks in tech startups for sure. Because it's the other extreme, right? Where you will have an organization where people keep growing it. They're real customers. The customers demand more and more, but nobody's investing in the quality of the software. And by quality, I mean maintainability, right? I don't mean anything else. But yeah, I'd say before product market fit, and arguably people will define it a bit differently, right? But before that, you could say that most startups will want to mostly focus on ruling out the product risk, like the market risk, the risks that if people want this product. So, I mean, there are notable examples where people did the opposite and they became successful, right? I don't know, Figma was developing, Dylan was developing the product for years, whatever, right? Probably invested a bunch into architecture and a lot of things, and he wasn't like ruling out the market risk at that point because he wasn't showing the product to anyone, right? And we know notable good examples, but the problem is we don't know about the bad examples because they're not alive, because they died. And that's where, I mean, if you look at it from sort of statistical perspective, you will totally see that market risk is just there higher, much higher than anything else. And at that point, when it's the highest risk, you just don't want to sort of limit your chances by investing in figuring out scalability problems.
Now, that's interesting, touching on the point there around survivors, like most of the stories we get to hear about are the ones that survive. And here, so we get to hear those stories. And I also wonder, like, maybe, I don't know if this is true or not, about what you and your organization does with it, because you're primarily, most often working with startups, not exclusively, but I'm saying most often. In my company, we kind of stray away from working with startups because historically, back in the day, many years ago, when we were first kind of growing as a consultancy, most of the companies hiring us were startups, and most of them went out of business within a couple years, and so we didn't get to keep working with those projects. And so it was the companies that, through that process, a couple years down the road, there were projects that were surviving, but then maybe they needed people to pick up those projects and continue maintaining them and continue adding to them and cleaning them up and polishing them and making them, helping those applications persist beyond because they found the product market fit, or they found that there was enough utility with the product that they want, the software project, to keep in wanting to invest in it. For a long time, a lot of our startups, we always had to find new clients so quickly because they kept going out of business at some point, and that wasn't necessarily our fault because they didn't know how to sell it, and they had an idea and they invested in it, and that happens. So you have that perspective. I've seen companies go out of business, so I've always been like, this is like, it's a lot of investment into the sales process, and seeing people get sad that their businesses didn't quite work out. A lot of heartache working with startups sometimes, or stresses. What's been your kind of experience in, having been how long have you been at Evil Martians now?
I'm at the company since 2017, and the company's been around since 2006. I agree, absolutely. You're absolutely right. There is this intrinsic risk in any new entrepreneurial effort or any new beginning, you could say. And it is there. For example, even if you think of our internal startups, and we have some internal project where we commercialize software, commercialize open source software. And this is where, I have all the bias in the world, and I will say, oh no, these are the best, these are the real ones, this is killer software, and it's going to be an amazing business and product. But there's a part of me that says, there's still this 90% chance that it's not going to survive after 4 years. So it's there, it's true. And it's true that we got to be looking for new clients. That's absolutely true. The other side of that is the upside. And the upside is that we were lucky, I think, to work with a bunch of startups that grew into unicorns. And one of them is Teleport. Teleport is secure access to infrastructure software, and they sell to big enterprises, and they are pretty big. And we started with working with them at seed stage when it was really early product, and help them launch some stuff and build out some stuff. And we still continue launching new initiatives for them. And the relationship is amazing, and we're not looking to grow our team, scale our team the same way Teleport is scaling their in-house teams. We still work with them as a small team, just maybe a couple of people here and there. But their success is helping us for sure, helping us, get new clients and learn a bunch of stuff and learn how to build. I'm not saying we can, it's going to be a deal breaker if you work with Evil Martians, you're going to be successful. If you don't work with Evil Martians, you're not going to be successful. No, of course not. Like you said, there's a bunch of sides of the business that we're not in any, relation with. But we still learn something from successful cases. And we can help sometimes.
Hey folks, it's me, Robby. I want you to take a moment and close your eyes. Now picture your code and your applications as a symphony. Now to keep that symphony playing smoothly, you need an orchestra of tools. That's where our podcast sponsor, AppSignal, takes center stage. They combine the elegance of error tracking, the precision of performance monitoring, and the harmony of logging into one symphonic suite. Whether you're composing with Ruby, jamming with Elixir, orchestrating with Node.js, or harmonizing with Python, or maybe even a little bit of flourish of JavaScript, AppSignal's got the sheet music for you. And here's the crescendo. Plans start at just $23 US a month. That's gotta be music to your budget's ears. Plus they're certified ISO 27001 and they dance the GDPR and HIPAA compliance beats. So don't miss a beat, my friends. Head on over to appsignal.com and tell them that your good friend Robby from Maintainable sent you. Now, open your eyes and let the symphony of smooth coding begin. Let's get back to our show. That's an interesting perspective there in terms of you've been around and seeing some of the startups strive and grow and go through those different changes. And so being around that, even if it's like a minor part of your organization, has been a part of the secret sauce that's allowed that unicorn to become the unicorn that they are. And that's helpful for you get to learn just from like watching that business with the things that they do well and the things that maybe some of the mistakes that they make. I think it's interesting because it's like, I think one of the things I love the most about working in the consulting side of the equation is we get to work with, 12 to 15 different clients a year. Maybe you have more clients than we do typically in a year, but approximately we're kind of exposed to different companies doing different things. And so we get to learn and we get to watch, and then we can share those stories with other clients. We don't have to like give anything proprietary away. Be like, well, I know that another company tried this and this is what didn't work for them. And I'm not saying it might not work for you, but at least hear this story. Maybe this might give you some perspective. And so I think it's a value that we can offer our clients that maybe just a full-time person coming into a company only has the previous companies they worked at, not that a dozen every year. It's like another dozen companies potentially come in, and like hundreds of companies I've worked with. A lot of them have done a lot of good, great, amazing, smart things. Some of them have done some really dumb things.
Exactly. And that's what they're looking for, right? They come to you, they know that you've been there so many times through difficult, working with legacy code bases or things like that. And those different experiences, like the range of experiences, is definitely helping you. But also, like you said, the fact that you worked with multiple entrepreneurs and teams, this is also where you accumulate something, you learn something.
Given that you run a software consultancy, there's a topic I always like to ask people that work in the consulting space, whether they're freelancers or contract. I know you don't necessarily do a lot of client work yourself, but as someone that's maybe part of the process of, maybe I'm making an assumption, but someone involved in the helping understand with your engineers, how do you help when you're bringing on new software engineers into your organization? Talk about how to be a good guest in another organization's code base and their team, because like we come in these engagements where you mentioned maybe there's a couple people on your team working with this startup, you mentioned Teleport. How do you be a good guest? How do you talk about that internally as like a thing? Like what does that look like there?
We do. That's really important. And I'd say in the recent years a lot has changed in our approach, because we used to be this, like, frankly, affordable offshore team. And again, we're still an offshore team. We're mostly in Europe, but with just few people here in the States. But we provide different value now. And that's where this becomes important, how the whole team is working with the client, the types of relationships that the whole team is building with the client's team. I mean, I'm serious. This was the major change for us. I mean, we're definitely learning something on the technical side, but it's, I'd say, more straightforward than this. And this is, for example, we have absolutely amazing team member, Amanda Kinney, and she, first of all, she's American, but also she started by coaching me, I think, and now she's our head of people development. So helping the whole team grow. We call it consultants, beta consultants. But what it means is, yeah, like you said, when the new engineer joins, of course we start with simple things, right? Start working as a part of the team somewhere on a real project. And mostly you start by communicating internally. But still, even within those kind of few first months, we do something where we start talking about the client's business with this person, the new merchant, and we will ask questions like, what do you think the company goals are right now? What do you think they do to achieve them? What's the midterm strategy? And now, what do you think about their priorities right now? Are they sort of in sync with the strategy or not? And what would you propose? Kind of, again, this is one perspective, kind of to proactively think about the company goals, because it's so important, because sometimes when people are not asking themselves those questions, they don't understand the context. And this is why I'm not saying that the new engineer should immediately go approach the CTO and tell them that they're doing everything wrong, right? Probably not. But I encourage them to start thinking about those questions. And at some point, they start bringing really good ideas. And then our work is to, of course, communicate those ideas in such a way that it's useful, actionable, and respectful of the team. Because, well, frankly, and you're probably in a similar situation, when we work with clients who have engineers already and designers, right? And we work with those teams, and there has to be a ton of respect for their work, even though often in technical sense or in the sense of, doing our tasks like scalability tasks, we are much more experienced than them in that. I mean, of course, right? And you guys are much more experienced, I think, very often than the customer's team. So it requires special attention to be able to guide the team while also respecting their side of the story, because the team has a much better understanding, the in-house team. I mean, the in-house team has a much better understanding of the product, the business, the history of the product, some context that is inevitably missing, like tribal knowledge.
The company politics, that, or the politics of that organization. And I don't know if you get to talk about that often with them, but...
Yeah, by the way, politics is one reason why I don't like working with later stage companies, because it becomes a burden for me when cannot openly discuss certain things within the organization, maybe between teams, or their kind of hidden walls or something like that. I don't like that, because I'm a very open person. I believe in discussing things as they are, as we see them. And I think it's important for every person in our work, in any kind of professional setting, to recognize that their point of view is unique, and they gotta share whatever they see from their point of view. Maybe they noticed some problems, and they would think, oh, I'm just a newbie engineer, probably everyone else knows about that. But it can be often the case that your point of view is so unique, so that nobody else is able to see it for some reason, or they got used to it. And that's why the culture where people can share, whatever they see is important, of course, in a respectful fashion, right? And this is where there's a little bit of a problem with not mentalities, I'd say culture codes, where, of course, some of the Northern European, Eastern European mentalities, they will be more straightforward and less polite in the West Coast sense.
I get that, and it's interesting. The funny, even there's these interesting differences, even whether or not it's Eastern Europe or people from Northern Europe, or versus. But we have the same. I've had employees that I hired that originally grew up in the East Coast of the United States come to Portland and be like, everybody here is really passive and overly nice and not afraid to say things, and it's just interesting. There's all these. So that happens on a lot of different levels. And thinking, just regardless if you're across the Atlantic Ocean or not, it's we have these weird things just based off of where you're from. And why is everybody so nice to each other and not just, but I feel like nobody's saying what needs to be said. And then the other perspective is why are you such a jerk about this? And it's
That's so true. That's so true. By the way, this is so true that we can call it the West Coast culture code is not allowing people to share feedback, the kind of constructive feedback, negative feedback, whatever, the feedback, just in openly. Because I had this example. So we had you mentioned I'm not working with clients. I am working with clients actually, but
account management related, or are you doing
I'm not doing hands-on account management, but I do communicate with clients in different scenarios, either at the beginning or with some clients I'm just checking in from time to time. And so this was this checking, and that was, I think, the client, CEO, CTO, and me and our head of backend, Vladimir. And we discussed feedback. We wanted feedback for the team. That was like super straightforward. We just wanted to collect feedback for the team. And it took about 20 minutes and at least 3 attempts at asking this question to actually get some feedback from the client. I remember it so vividly that the guys were just, oh, it's so great, it's so amazing. It's just, you guys are just as such an important part of our team. We love this. It's incredible. And we are like, okay, what could we do just a little bit better? Is there something where we could improve? And then, after 15 minutes, we found something that was there and that was actionable, that was useful. I'd say it's a little bit inefficient where you need so much, at the beginning.
I've experienced that myself. I've also been, it's interesting. I've also been on the other side where I've had clients that are very quickly able to help highlight all the problems that their concerns are. And then you're like, well, can you say something nice about us? Like you're not saying, you're not firing us. You want to keep working with us. So there must be something you like about.
And that's worse. That's worse, right? I agree. I sort of personally, I like people noticing the good sides.
It's helpful. Yes, it definitely keeps people encouraged. Projects can be challenging. Let's take a quick moment, just maybe make sure we dive a little bit more into what Evil Martians does for our listeners. So what does your team specialize in? You mentioned like startups, but like what is your kind of like core focus at the moment?
Evil Martians is our product development consulting, and we specialize on one particular industry, building products for engineers and designers. So this is where we started focusing on that 2 years ago, and it's been super useful. The idea is this. All those years, we've been working with startups, and we've been open sourcing our own tools. And we were lucky to be the team who built PostCSS. Andrei Sitnik, our head of frontend, built it, and it just kind of took off, and it's super popular. And a bunch of other things like image proxy, any cable in Rails ecosystem. There's a bunch of gems from us. We have Left Hook, which is language agnostic, used by GitLab. So a bunch of products we weren't necessarily commercializing them, but we were collaborating, communicating, and working with the type of audience that engineering audience, right, tech audience. So that's why we realized that if we focus on this type of products, on this, you could call it a small industry, like a really small one, but it is there. There is a bunch of even venture capital firms that sort of specialize on dev tools. So, or bigger, or some venture capital firms, they have funds dedicated to dev tools. I will say this year it's funds dedicated to dev tools and AI, and inevitably, but still there's a lot going on, and we see companies like Supabase, Neon, and of course Mongo, Elastic. It's a small niche, you could say, but it's enough for us, and that's where we specialize now, because we also specialize in product design for products for engineers, and this is where it becomes super specific, because designing those apps requires expertise.
It definitely does. And kind of one of the things I wanted to, you touched on this earlier when we were talking about building or commercializing open source projects. It's something I'm interested in talking with you about, because I have a open source project that I don't feel like I can. Maybe we should back up for a second. Maybe we can come back to this On My Z Shell topic in a moment. But maybe you can talk a little bit about the motivation of Evil Martians. Be like, maybe was it a question of like, oh, maybe we could charge for this, or was it that if we're going to invest in this particular open source project, it might make sense to have some way for us to monetize it in some way so that we can pay for the time that we're putting into it? Or how do you kind of like, but then and then also be accountable for it is the thing that I'm always kind of curious about. Like, well, now that your people are paying you for this project, so maybe just talk us through how that story came about.
I was actually launching sales for 2 of our products, but then better salespeople took over, luckily. But so that was image proxy and any cable. So the motivation was something like, we have this open source and we have the author, and the author is really passionate about the product and wants to, I don't know, dedicate his life to it, something like that, like really close to that, dedicate years of his life, like maybe a decade of his life to that, or her life, their life. And that's where we consider different options. Because one of the products we sell is fonts, is the font, Martian Grotesque. We tried commercializing the font as well. We have an open source font, monospaced Martian Mono, but we do sell licenses for Martian Grotesque. So long story short, font is not a venture, investable, whatever story, right? It's a different story. But when we think about products that, especially those that can grow, we see how those products can deliver value to organizations. We can see how we can pinpoint the value that this product brings. And this is when we discuss different strategies. One of them is, doing a bootstrapped business out of it. The other alternative is raising venture capital and growing it and sort of competing with bigger competitors. So in the case of image proxy, there are already a bunch of SaaSes that optimize images on the fly, like Cloudinary and others. Some CDNs also have this functionality. But when we started selling a pro version, just that, the pro version that had some additional features. In case of image proxy, I think the biggest feature was custom watermarks. This was the feature. So you're not only optimizing the images on the fly, but now you're also adding a custom watermark. And also you have some additional savings, let's say, like some smart, I think it was, we built like some bits of image optimization are written in Rust even. Okay, I think C for sure, but like it's pretty sort of low level magic. We're definitely using libvips, but it's not only that. And this is where we started selling it, and we figured out that we immediately found some big organizations paying us tens of thousands of dollars for the license. And the reason why they did it is because when they compare the cost of SaaS, which is also, keeps growing, and when it's below, I don't know, $1,000 per year, you're not noticing it, right? But as you grow, you start noticing your SaaS bills. And again, it's what DHH is talking about a lot, right? You're noticing the infrastructure cost. But in our case, we're just comparing the SaaS bill for large organizations. And what we sell as an alternative is this software that is doing the exact same thing with like essentially the same like options, similar API. But you run it on-prem. It's becoming much easier to run and scale software on-premise. And you're only purchasing the license for us, which is much more affordable than paying for the SaaS. And also, if you think about SaaS, you often store a bunch of data on the third party, and it's hard to migrate, sort of. If they change pricing, you're going to suffer. Yeah, that was one of the ideas, I think, behind selling on-premise licenses. And I think, I deviated. But you asked so the motivation again was to build a business so that the founder can focus on building this product, growing this product. And with Image Proxy, we decided we're going to try the VC route. So yes, we had to be accountable for the internal investment, like you said. Every consulting company is sort of spending all their profits on some internal project. Sometimes, yeah. So this is the story. The problem is like we discussed at the beginning, every new initiative, every new venture is a high-risk investment vehicle. So has super high risk. So you don't want to invest all your profit or whatever the portion of profit you want to invest in one thing, right? This is stupid. So that's why my approach is that we invest in several projects every year, and we need a certain scale for that. And so it has to be, sort of a part of the bigger strategy. But we know the amounts we can invest every year in projects, and they have goals, and they either need to raise external money or they need to start earning and, sort of become kind of sustaining within Evil Martians. And maybe then they decide they can separate. But yeah, so what happened with Image Proxy, they had a safe-like investment agreement with us, with Evil Martians, and so that when they raise external funding, we get a share based on the valuation they get at that round, but we get discount to that valuation because we invested earlier. So we're not trying to, I don't know if it's to kind of VC like talk, but we're not trying to figure out valuation for the projects we invest in internally because they are so early stage. It's super hard to guess. But there's this, safe like investment agreement where you don't have to have a valuation at that stage. You can just say whatever valuation you get at the next round, we're going to get a certain discount to that. And that's where we get a stake. So this happened last year. We had 2 events. One of them, Image Proxy incorporated into a separate entity and raised external capital. And the other event is one other project where we also invested. And it was a new one. They got essentially acquired by our client, playbook.com. And this is where we also got a stake in that deal.
Oh, interesting. So you've been able to kind of help maybe rely on that, to some extent, like your client relation to help cover back some of the investment that you've made for those projects. It's interesting. Like I know that for a long time in our business, we thought we were going to like spin up some SaaS products, and I have a blog post somewhere where I think I made a list of like 6 or 7 apps that we built and we're working on, and then eventually killed and explained why we stopped investing in them. And some of those conversations, or some of those were just because other company posted a blog post that said that they were doing something. And I'm like, well, we're not going to do better than them. So let's just stop. They're going to beat us to it. And so, but it's funny.
But seriously, somebody posted some blog post and you stopped working on your product? Crazy. I mean, yeah,
It was 37 signals.
Oh, there was I see, but yeah.
And they didn't release the product that I thought they were. So you live and learn. But the other part of it was,
so we got to see something from you then in the end.
Maybe. But the other part of it goes back to earlier in the conversation that we would work with so many companies that didn't survive, that I think it planted a huge seed of doubt in my brain that I'm capable of being a product person. Because I'm like, I'm really good at helping companies solve their problems and then moving on and work on other projects. And I like that part of it. And I'm like, when I look at like a new product, I'm like, dude, I can build it, but can I sell it? Can I market it? I'm like, I don't have those skills necessarily. At least I don't think I do. So that's why this conversation comes up at least every year with one or two people on our team will ask like, hey, why don't we build an app? And I'm like, not that we've never thought about it, like obviously, but then we made a decision, my business partner and I, maybe a decade ago, where we said, you know what, if we're going to build a product at some point, that's got to be a separate business. Because you mentioned earlier about using profits to invest into the project. And so we're like, no, would we put our own money into financing this, then we'll do it. And so I've never had that much conviction about a specific product idea that I'm like, I'm going to go do that separately and try to run that in parallel to what we're doing, which is client consulting business. Because I just felt like it got really awkward when it was under the same umbrella, because it was hard to quit investing time into a project because you kind of like, well, let's just keep doing it. Let's keep chasing this thing down. And we spent a lot of, we had our own time tracking application that we built, and I used the tool to figure out how much we had spent on building the tool. And I was like, why don't we switch to Harvest?
That makes sense. I mean, it's a good thing that you're able to make those decisions. There is an important distinction that I want to make here between I sort of can take credit for that, what I convinced our shareholders to do, versus what the many consulting companies are doing. So the distinction is that we are not building products as Evil Martians. That's not what's happening. What's happening is that we find a super talented and already successful in certain way author of open source, and then we pair this person with a potential co-founder, and then we invest in them. They become the owners of the product. It's not me, not the shareholders of Evil Martians. I mean, the original founders. I mean, I'm also a small shareholder of the company, but it's not the founders of the consulting company who become the founders of this product. It's a different situation where we start by saying that you guys are the founders of this product. You, the author of open source, you are the founder of this company. Now, we will invest in you on certain conditions, something like we'll give you 3 months time or 6 months time, whatever. But you got to show us sales, I mean, for me, I want to see people pay money for something. Yeah, for this. So, of course, we start when there's already something, like the person already spent their free time on that. They have traction. The open source is picking up. We know companies, organizations are using it. Something like that. There's certain signs that we're looking for. And then we seriously approach it as an investment decision. You could say that we have an investment committee, which is true. And then we say, okay, this is going to be the investment. These are going to be the results that we're looking for. And if the results are not there, sort of no hard feelings, right? So we've tried. And if it didn't work out, great, we've learned something. That's it, right? And like you said, sometimes you announce something and then you stop working on it. It happens all the time. And some of that you can then maybe turn into marketing effort. Like some of the people are open sourcing stuff, something that they've been building in closed source, and then they open source it, and then it brings some marketing value, right, from that. So this can also happen. What I'm trying to say is it's not Evil Martians owning 100% image proxy. No. Evil Martians is a minority investor image proxy. That's how it works. And that's what I believe in. That's the model that I believe in, where I know that it's not you, Robby Russell, building a bunch of products while also running the consulting business, right? It's people from your team who become founders. At least that's our case.
No, I appreciate you kind of digging into, I had not heard that particular, at least the framing around how you're thinking about that. Because I think from the outsider perspective, limited knowledge I have of what Evil Martians does, I assumed that was, something that came up within the organization. And then you're like, okay, cool, we have a product now. But like hearing a little bit more about behind the scenes, how you're thinking about structuring that, I think that's very helpful. Just coincidentally, I talked to a potential client like a week ago, and they had mentioned Evil Martians, and they're like, "Oh, we were talking to Evil Martians because they're the ones that made it." That's how. So in an interesting way, that's how they think about it, like potential customers. So I don't think I'm, but I think that distinction is interesting, just like behind the scenes. That I don't think I've heard a lot of people at those companies talk about it in that quite that way, about how they're like, "Let's try this. It's going to spin it out." So when you maybe this could be a longer conversation another time. I'd be mindful of your time there. But basically what I try to do with my company is say, if there's something separate, it's got to be separate. It's going to be like, we're going to pull it out, extract it. So I think it's not out of kind of what you're saying resonates with me, but what I'm going to be very clear with my employees is, we're not going to become a company that builds a SaaS product and that we're all going to switch over to that project tomorrow and focus on that, because we need to make money and this thing needs to pay for itself. Like, this is the business model. This is what we do. We're consultants. We're not consulting streaming of not being consultants.
Exactly. And again, I actually like consulting. I like this work, and I think it's a great work on its own. It doesn't have to be something else. Consulting is great work and great career path and great personal choice, you could say, and choice and business model. But I'd say sometimes there is a byproduct of consulting where you are, in our case, we open source some tools. Then we notice that we use them on a bunch of client projects. And again, image proxy was just like that, right? We needed something like a proxy to process images from eBay, by the way. Yeah. But you notice people that not only you are using it, but then your clients keep using those tools. And maybe this is where you can use your multiple experiences on multiple projects. And in our case, this is startups, so we will end up finding clues on which products to build for startups. If you work with enterprise software companies, you will find clues on which products to build for those enterprise tech organizations, right? So that's where you might then turn those clues into a separate process where you invest in them.
We'll be back with our interview with Irina in just a moment. Hi, it's me, Robby. I just wanted to take a moment to say thank you for listening to the Maintainable Software Podcast. If you're finding these conversations valuable, please consider sharing a link, maybe for this episode, amongst your peers on LinkedIn, X, Twitter, Mastodon, Threads, Instagram, TikTok, Snapchat, Hippie Chap. Send it to your latest Tinder match, Bumble, Hinge, whatever. Yeah, just be like, maybe that could be your opening line. And when you're sending a message on one of these dating apps, be like, hey, have you heard this episode with Irina Nazarova from CEO of Evil Martians? Who knows? Could be a good conversation starter. Could be a total buzzkill. Also, is there someone you think that I should interview on Maintainable? Make your recommendation to Robby with a Y at maintainable.fm. And now, back to our interview with Irina Nazarova. No, that makes sense. And I think the other byproducts of the experience that we're gaining in these engagements with our clients and having so many different clients over the years and seeing so many different stories is another byproduct is just the experience that we can then share, whether through podcasts or writing books or speaking at conferences. That is another sort of product in some ways. We can kind of productize our experience. It's one of the interesting things that my team often struggles with when we're having like book clubs about usually more on things related to like team processes and dynamics and like working models for organizations is that a lot of literature, for example, it seems to be like if you are the product company you're the company that is building a product, here's how you can structure your team, but they're not often writing, there's not a lot of books kind of focused around like if you run an agency where you're servicing several clients, how do you manage that operational thing? I don't feel like there's as much literature in that space.
That's true. And that's not fair, right? Because they are a great consulting company. I mean, both in tech and beyond tech, they're like McKinsey's of the world and etc. So, and they've written some books, by the way. Some of them are good. But I agree that it's definitely the case where it's even unfair that everyone around is like starting a startup, getting investments, building products, and you building the consulting company, which takes so much effort and so much like personal involvement, right, into this. You're not getting sort of any support, let's say, from this whole community. But that's true. But by the way, I'm gonna give 2 talks this year about that, about our work. I'll try. So I'm speaking at Sin City Ruby in March. So Jason specifically asked me to talk about our work, and he also asked me to talk about my lifestyle, which is funny, but I'll add that somehow, I think. But yeah, I'll be speaking at Balkan Ruby as well in Europe, and about our work as consultants.
That's wonderful. A couple of quick last questions for you, Irina. Is there a non-technical, non-software specific book that you find yourself recommending to either your coworkers, your clients, peers quite a bit?
One book that I've recently recommended our managers to read called Challenger Sale or Challenger Sales, something like that. It's a good book. It's something I think we've been unconsciously doing for a bunch of time, but the book gives you an insight. So the book gives you an idea that building a relationship with the client is not everything you need. So it's like almost saying that folks that build the best relationships are not the best sales, which is interesting. So you got to sort of challenge the client, and that's what the book is about, like teach the client. Yeah. Mm-hmm.
Yeah, we read that. We had a project manager ask us in our book club, maybe like, I want to say 12 years ago, maybe we read that. And so it's interesting. Like I'll include links to that in the show notes for people. But it's an interesting thing where we should talk books in the near future. Maybe we can trade some recommendations to each other. But I remember that one stood out quite a bit because it was just like we were so focused on trying to foster these good relationships, and it always felt like we'd hop on a call with our clients, and then there was like the usual banter, checking in, and not that we shouldn't build relationships and want to know details about our clients, like personal lives, and like check in on us about their kids, or the conversations we have with clients about the weather, where they're at. I mean, you and I literally did that as soon as we got on the call today, but it's just one of those niceties or things that we do. But thinking about what the organization's goals are that you're working with and challenging them, and in a way of being like, are you making decisions to that, and kind of holding them accountable to that, and kind of which gets into other topics related to I know you've mentioned this online a little bit, but thinking about value-based pricing or something in that space of thinking of this podcast probably isn't the place to dive into that because most of our listeners are probably not necessarily in those roles, but I like to geek out about this stuff as well. So maybe we can talk about that offline at some point, or we can post a link on Twitter.
We should. Yeah, we should do it. Maybe we should do a meetup for people doing consulting.
Yeah, maybe. Where can people follow your thoughts and ruminations about the art of software engineering and development and leading an agency, developer tools online?
So I have an account on X. They still call it Twitter. So maybe we'll just link my Twitter handle. We have a newsletter at evilmartians.com that you can sign up for, and you'll be getting our content straight to your inbox. And this is where I'm publishing things like value-based pricing or more sort of business related content where I'm learning, like you said, I'm learning from successful clients, let's say later stage clients, and sharing this knowledge with earlier stage clients so that they have bigger chances of success, which is super important, like you said. Yeah, maximizing their chances of success is very important for us.
It's great. Well, definitely include links to those, to your newsletter and stuff in the show notes. And with that, it's been such a delight having you join us on Maintainable, Irina. Thank you so much for stopping by to talk shop with us, and look forward to speaking with you again.
Thank you so much, Robby. I hope we'll meet this year somewhere, and I hope we'll continue this conversation. Thank you.